She was my sister, until she betrayed me in court. The sky hung low, sagging with heavy clouds that threatened to break any minute. A sharp breeze carried the scent of wet leaves and distant rain. I stood by the casket in my black wool coat, my hands clenched in my pockets, jaw tight. My mother lay still inside, her hands folded gently over her chest, the same hands that once cupped my face when I cried as a boy. Roses. She always smelled like roses when she worked in the garden, those bright red heirlooms she swore could outlive us all. I could still see her knelt in the dirt, humming under her breath, thorns scratching her gloves, lips pursed in concentration. She wasn't perfect, but she was mine, and now she was gone. A quiet rustle behind me, then the sharp click of heels. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. "Tom," Linda said softly, her voice like polished marble, smooth, cold. I turned, and there she was. My sister. Designer black coat, dark sunglasses, hair twisted into a perfect chignon that hadn't moved an inch despite the wind. She wore grief like a brooch, elegant, visible, and entirely removable. "You made it," I said, flatly. She smiled, that familiar, hollow thing she always did at family holidays. Of course. She was our mother. I didn't respond. Instead, I looked back at the coffin. The priest was still speaking, reading a verse about rest and peace. I wasn't listening. "I flew in last night," Linda added, adjusting her gloves. "Didn't want to make a scene." No, Linda never made scenes. She orchestrated them. The ceremony ended too quickly, and I watched as the casket was lowered into the earth. The sound of dirt hitting the lid felt louder than it should have, like someone throwing stones at a window that wouldn't open. We walked in silence to the row of parked cars. I half expected her to vanish into a black SUV with tinted windows, the way she did after our father's funeral 10 years ago. But instead, she stayed, waiting, watching. "She wanted us to have peace, Tom," she said, adjusting the strap on her purse. "No fighting, no regrets." I turned toward her. "You remember the will?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We should talk, but not here." I nodded, not because I agreed, but because arguing in a cemetery felt like feeding vultures. She always knew how to choose the moment, didn't she? As we stood there, surrounded by wilting flower stands and distant thunder, I looked at her, really looked. The sister I once built treehouses with, the girl who stole my comic books and cried when I pretended to be dead on Halloween. Now, a woman I barely recognized. And yet, something inside me still wanted to believe she meant well, that she had come home for the same reason I had, to say goodbye. But my gut twisted, a quiet alarm I didn't yet understand. And her parting words stayed with me long after she drove off in that sleek black car. "We'll talk soon." The smell of leather and old paper filled the small office. A slow ceiling fan spun above us, doing little to stir the air. I sat stiffly in one of the armchairs across from the desk, arms folded across my chest. Across from me sat Linda, legs crossed, one perfectly manicured hand resting lightly on her knee, the other clutching a silk clutch that matched her blouse too well for a grieving daughter. Between us sat Mr. Grayson, our mother's attorney, a man in his 70s with a bent spine, kind eyes, and a voice like dry newspaper. He had been with our family since before I was born, and once called me Tommy when I was still small enough to climb into his chair and pretend I ran the place. Today, he looked older than I remembered. "Thank you both for coming," he said gently, folding his hands over a thick envelope. "I know this isn't easy. Let's just get it over with," Linda said, polite but brisk. I didn't speak. I just watched her. I'd been watching her since the funeral. Grayson nodded, slid the envelope open, and pulled out a set of papers. "Your mother's last known will, dated February of last year, is quite clear. She split all assets evenly. The house, the land, the savings account, and the contents of her estate, all to be divided equally between the two of you." I exhaled slowly. Relief, like warm water. Linda, however, didn't blink. She opened her clutch and pulled out another document. Crisp, uncreased, too new. "I'm sorry, but there's a newer version," she said, offering the paper to Grayson with a neutral expression. Grayson blinked. "A newer? It's dated 3 weeks before she passed," Linda said. She updated it. "I have the notarized copy. The original is with the firm that handled the amendment." Grayson took the paper reluctantly and examined it under the reading lamp. I leaned forward, already feeling my pulse rise. "What the hell is this, Linda?" "I didn't want to bring it up until we were here," she said calmly, eyes fixed on Grayson. I thought it best to do it properly. Grayson squinted at the signature, then leaned back, lips pressed tight. The document is notarized, yes, same signature. What does it say? I asked, though I already knew. I could see it in her posture. The slight tilt of her head, the tiny controlled breath she drew in. He adjusted his glasses. It states that the entirety of your mother's estate is to go to Linda. Silence, thick and sour. I stood, barely aware I'd done it. This is a fake. It has to be. She never would have. Tom, Linda interrupted softly. I know this is a shock, but it's real. I have the paperwork. You can verify it yourself. I will, I snapped. Because there's no way in hell Mom would just cut me out. Grayson cleared his throat. It's not unheard of for last of minute changes, especially when she was dying, I said. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was tired. She knew exactly what she was doing, Linda said, her tone sharpening just a little. And if you're implying I manipulated her, I'm not implying it, I said. I'm saying it. Her jaw tensed. Grayson raised a hand. This is not the place for accusations. Mr. Carter, you have every right to contest the document if you believe it was signed under duress or forged. Good, I said, because I'm going to. Linda let out a quiet sigh, like a mother indulging a tantrum. Tom, dragging this through court will only hurt both of us. Funny, I said. You seemed fine dragging a whole new will out of your bag like a magic trick. Grayson stood slowly. I'll provide copies to both parties. I'd advise you both to speak with your own counsel before proceeding. I didn't look at Linda as I left the office. I didn't need to. I could feel her watching me, like she always did when she thought she'd won. But this wasn't over, not even close. The courtroom smelled like polish and old paper. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long bars of light across the polished floor. The American flag hung behind the judge's bench, slightly faded, its edges curled with age. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my tie choking me, my knuckles white as I gripped the armrest of the chair. Linda sat across the aisle, in a dove-gray suit, her hair pulled back, face calm. Too calm. She glanced at me once as the judge entered the room, not with spite, not with triumph, but with that same hollow serenity I'd seen at the funeral. Court is now in session, the bailiff announced. Judge Rourke, a tall, sharp-featured woman with tired eyes, took her seat and nodded to the attorneys. Linda's lawyer, some hotshot from out of town, stood and delivered the opening statement, painting her as the dutiful daughter, the one who dropped everything to care for our mother, the one who supported her emotionally, physically, financially, the one who earned the inheritance. I stared ahead, jaw locked. If only they knew. Linda hadn't spoken to Mom for almost a year until the last month. But to the court, she was Florence Nightingale in pearls. When it was my turn, my lawyer, Susan, did what she could. She emphasized the timing. A new will, drafted 3 weeks before Mom died. No clear reason for the change. No medical documentation proving she was of sound mind. But lacking hard evidence, all we had was implication, and implication never wins against a notarized signature. Then came the witnesses. Linda took the stand first. Can you tell the court about your relationship with your mother in the last months of her life? Her attorney asked. She gave a soft smile, eyes just a little glassy. I moved in with her after her fall in January. I stayed with her most nights. We talked a lot. She told me she was proud of me and that she wanted things to be simple after she was gone, that she didn't want more fighting. She even dabbed at her eye with a tissue. It was a perfect performance. Not too emotional, not cold, just believable enough. And did she seem clear? Mentally, I mean. Yes, Linda said. She was tired, but lucid. I leaned forward slightly. My fingers tapped against my thigh. I could feel the shift in the room. The judge was watching her closely, and more importantly, sympathetically. When it was our turn to cross-examine, Susan asked about inconsistencies. Why Mom never told me about the change, why there was no paper trail of Linda's supposed caregiving. But Linda had answers. Smooth ones. Did you ever discuss this new will with your brother? Susan asked. I didn't want to hurt him, Linda replied. I hoped it wouldn't come to this. Then it was my turn. I stood. I hadn't planned to speak, but I couldn't sit there listening to her rewrite history. Your Honor, I said, my voice quieter than I meant. My mother was private, but she wasn't cruel. She never would have left me out like this. Judge Rourke nodded. Go on, Mr. Carter. She and I talked regularly. We didn't always agree, but she trusted me. She left things in my care for years, the bills, the garden, even her medical proxy. Then suddenly, she signs everything to Linda after one visit? Linda didn't flinch. She just looked at me like I was someone else's problem. I don't believe that signature was made willingly, I continued. And if it was, I think it was under pressure. Do you have any evidence of that? The judge asked. Silence. No, I admitted. And just like that, the air shifted again. The ruling came a week later. I sat in the same courtroom, same tie, same sick feeling in my stomach. The court finds the last will and testament submitted by Ms. Linda Carter to be valid and enforceable. I barely heard the rest. Linda gave a tight nod. Her lawyer shook her hand. I didn't look at either of them. I walked out into the cold wind and thought, this is what being erased feels like. Quiet, slow, and somehow completely legal. Later that evening, I stood outside my mother's house. Well, Linda's house now. A moving truck idled in the driveway. Men in gloves carried out boxes, wrapped furniture, framed photos. Through the window, I saw Linda standing in the living room, the room where we opened presents as kids, where Mom taught me how to fix a lamp, where she used to dance barefoot when she thought no one was looking. Linda didn't cry. She supervised. I watched as one of the movers handed her a small wooden box, the old recipe box with Mom's handwriting on the lid. She smiled faintly, not from joy, from victory. Then, as if she sensed me, she looked up, right at me. Through the window, our eyes met. And for a moment, I saw something crack, a flicker of something in her face. Guilt? Regret? No, just recognition. She won, and I had nothing. But what neither of us knew then was that the war had only just begun. The warehouse behind my shop hadn't been touched in years. It was an old wooden structure, half leaning against the back of the building, smelling of dry sawdust, rusted nails, and damp cardboard. The floor creaked under my boots as I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic, flashlight in hand. I hadn't planned to come here, but something in me, call it instinct, or maybe just the need to breathe somewhere she hadn't touched, drove me to the one place untouched by courts, signatures, or smug glances through polished windows. Boxes were stacked in uneven piles. Some were labeled with dates, others with nothing at all. A few had been chewed at the corners by time or mice. I pulled the nearest one open, old tax records. Another, Christmas ornaments wrapped in newspaper from 1994. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a photo, maybe a scrap of her handwriting, maybe just a reason not to feel so damn hollow. Then I saw it, a small box shoved near the back wall, dusty but intact. It was labeled in neat black marker, faded but still readable. For Tom, when you're ready. My breath caught. I dropped to my knees and slid it toward me. The lid lifted easily, as if it had been waiting. Inside, a worn cassette tape in a cracked plastic case. A small handheld recorder with a set of AA batteries rubber-banded to the side. I just stared at it for a moment. My hands were shaking as I loaded the tape and clicked play. For a second, nothing but static. Then, "Hi, sweetheart," my mother's voice came through. Soft, older than I remembered, with a tremble I hadn't noticed in real life. If you're hearing this, then I suppose things didn't go the way I hoped. I closed my eyes. She continued, "I didn't want to leave things messy. I tried, Tom. I tried to do the right thing, to make it fair. But Linda's always had a way of making people see what she wants them to see." I froze. She's charming, isn't she? Always was. Even as a little girl, teachers loved her, neighbors adored her. She could lie through her teeth with a smile, and you'd still thank her afterward. A pause, then a sigh. I kept forgiving her because she was mine, because I thought I had time to fix it. But if you're listening to this, I guess she's already done what I feared. I sat back on my heels, the recorder still playing in my lap, the tape whirring softly. She came to me near the end, Mom went on, said she wanted to make peace, said she was sorry for being distant. I wanted to believe her. God help me, I did. But something about her smile, it didn't reach her eyes anymore. The sound of a chair creaking, a breath drawn slowly. I didn't change the will, Tom. If she has something that says I did, it wasn't me. And if she's taken everything, I want you to remember this. You were always the one I trusted. You were the one who showed up, who stayed. Don't let her make you forget that. My jaw clenched. I felt it in my teeth, in my throat, in the ache deep behind my eyes. "Don't fight her in court," she whispered. "She'll win there. She always wins where people can see her. But behind the curtain, when no one's watching, that's where her threads start to come undone." I stopped the tape. Silence filled the attic again. Dust hung in the air like a frozen snowfall. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, the weight of her words sinking into my chest like stones. It wasn't about the money anymore, or even the house. It was about the lie, the theft of truth, the quiet, knowing smile of a sister who'd buried our mother and then buried me right after, in the same gesture. I stood slowly. The air felt heavier, but my steps were lighter. No more courtrooms. No more lawyers. If Linda thought she'd won, good. Let her think so. Because the real game, the one she couldn't play in heels and designer grief, that game was mine now. And I play slow. The light in my workshop buzzed faintly overhead, casting a pale yellow hue across the scattered piles of invoices, legal pads, and folded blueprints. My space had always been about building, custom furniture, clean lines, small pieces of permanence. But now I was building something else, something invisible. Revenge is not rage. Rage is loud, messy, and it burns out fast. Revenge is quiet, methodical. It wears gloves. It keeps records. I started with her husband, Travis Lambert, general contractor, mid-level, mid-ambitious. Ran a company called Lambert & Sons, even though he had no sons and no real legacy to pass on. But he had something else, debt, and plenty of it. A few phone calls, some back-channel inquiries, and I had a profile, 3 outstanding business loans, 2 on equipment, 1 personal, high interest, behind on payments, a lien on a storage unit in his name. Perfect. I created 2 shell companies. On paper, they looked like investment groups, one based out of Florida, the other New Mexico. Fake addresses, real tax IDs, and a legal firewall between me and the money. Within 2 weeks, I owned his second loan in full. By the end of the month, the other 2. His financial heart was now beating in the palm of my hand. But I didn't squeeze. Not yet. First, I watched. It started small. A call to his office about accelerated repayment. A letter with words like restructuring and liquidation. Then another. This time, a formal notice of default. Linda wouldn't have seen any of this. She never looked beneath the surface. Not at Travis. Not at me. Then came the canceled contract. Lambert & Sons had been set to renovate a boutique hotel downtown. But after a private investor expressed concern about Travis's liquidity, the deal fell through. Then another job stalled. A restaurant renovation. Same excuse. Different middleman. Both names traced back to me. It was like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. And Linda? She smiled through it. Wore fresh lipstick. Posted family brunch photos online. Probably thought it was just a rough patch. I wondered how many missed calls she was ignoring, how many envelopes she left unopened on the counter, until the letter about the house landed in her mailbox. The mortgage had always been steep, too steep for their real income, but Linda liked big kitchens and quiet cul-de-sacs. The foreclosure warning wasn't public yet, but it would be, soon. I sat at my workbench that night, staring at a printed photo of their house, the one Mom had hated for its gated sterility. "You took my mother. Now I'm taking your illusion." One afternoon, I parked across the street from her house, engine off, windows cracked. I watched Travis storm out the front door, yelling into his phone, suit jacket flapping behind him like a bad decision. He kicked the side of his truck before getting in. 2 minutes later, Linda appeared. She stepped outside in heels too high for the driveway, holding a to-go cup, wrapped in a cream sweater like the world wasn't unraveling around her. She didn't look panicked. She looked annoyed. That's what stung the most. She still didn't understand. She still thought the world would bend around her charm, the way it always had. That there'd be some safety net she hadn't earned, a father, a husband, a lawyer, a lie. But not this time. She didn't know the trap was already closed, that every exit was locked, that every phone call she made about refinancing was being intercepted by someone I paid, not to ruin her, just to delay her, just long enough. Back at the workshop, I listened to Mom's tape again. Not all of it. Just the part where she whispered, "She always wins where people can see her." But behind the curtain, I smiled. This was behind the curtain, where Linda Carter had no applause, no curated image to hide behind. Just bills. Just pressure. Just silence on the other end of the phone. She tried to erase me. Now, I was rewriting her life, one debt at a time. By week 6, Travis had stopped going to work. By week 7, the minivan disappeared from the driveway. Repossessed. I never called her. Never sent her a message. Never gloated. That was the point. The best revenge isn't loud. It's invisible until it's all that's left. The cafe sat on the edge of town, just past the train tracks and far enough from the center that no one came here by accident. It was quiet inside. Low ceilings, chipped tile floors, a single fan that clicked every few seconds like a nervous metronome. I picked the table farthest from the windows. My coffee had gone cold 10 minutes ago, untouched. I didn't like public places for conversations, but I had agreed when she asked to meet. The message she'd sent was brief. Let's end this. At 3:01 p.m., the door opened. Linda walked in wearing dark jeans and a beige coat, no makeup, hair pulled back in a messy knot. She didn't look like someone who'd just lost everything. She looked like someone who had stopped pretending she hadn't. She saw me, tilted her head slightly, and walked over. Still drink it black? She asked, nodding toward my cup. Still fake concern? I replied. She didn't flinch, just sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table like this was a business lunch. You've been busy, she said softly. I said nothing. I traced the LLCs this morning, she continued. Took me a while. You covered your tracks well, very quietly. I watched her. No denial, no acting surprised. Just the slow unveiling of something we both already knew. You made calls, pulled loans, whispered to the right people, killed deals, restructured debt until Travis couldn't breathe. Are you here to scream at me? I asked. She shook her head. No. I'm here to say thank you. My jaw tightened. What? I knew it was you, she said. Maybe not at first, but the more things fell apart, the timing, the precision, I knew it wasn't random. I leaned back. And you're grateful? She gave a faint smile. Not smug, not sarcastic, just tired. I've been trying to blow up my life for 2 years, she said quietly. But I didn't know how to do it without hurting the kids, without turning into the villain. You did it for me. I stared at her, stunned. You think this is a favor? She nodded once. Travis was cheating on me, for months, with someone from his gym, I think. I found texts, photos. Why didn't you leave him? Because the house had my name on it. The kids wouldn't understand, and I didn't want to admit I built everything on a lie. I said nothing. The air between us grew still. My life was a performance, she went on. Perfect wife, perfect family, perfect inheritance, but it was all hollow. Even when I brought that will to court, I think part of me hoped you'd fight. I blinked. You wanted me to come after you? She nodded. I knew you'd come for me eventually, and I knew you wouldn't just shout in a courtroom. I knew you'd do it like this, clean, smart, quiet. You're the only person who ever saw through me. I gripped the edge of the table. I didn't know if I wanted to laugh or leave. You know what's funny? She added. I didn't think I'd feel relief. But when the foreclosure notice came, I finally slept. I looked at her, really looked. This wasn't the woman who had walked into the funeral draped in grief couture. This was someone scorched and standing in the ashes. And smiling. You ruined my life, she said softly, and it was the most honest thing anyone's ever done for me. Silence. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded check. She slid it across the table. I hesitated before opening it. It was blank, except for one word written in blue ink where the amount should be, thank you. I looked up. I don't want anything, she said. Not from you, not from the past. I'm done pretending we were ever family. But I needed you to know. I let it happen. I exhaled. The weight of those words landed heavier than I expected. You wanted destruction, I murmured. And I gave it to you. You gave me freedom, she said. It just looked like destruction. Then she stood, placed her hands on the back of the chair for a second like she might say something else, but didn't. She just looked at me one last time and said, "Goodbye, Tom," and then she was gone. The bell above the cafe door jingled softly as it closed. I sat there, the check still in my hand, the weight of 100 plans now meaningless. I had spent months building her ruin, and she had been waiting for it like a gift. I didn't know whether I felt victorious or defeated. The old house stood crooked at the edge of the property, its paint peeling like dried skin, its windows hollowed out and sun-bleached. No one had touched the garden since the funeral. The roses were gone. Only the thorns remained, gnarled vines curling like forgotten questions across the rusted fence. I parked at the edge of the overgrown drive and walked the path barefoot. I needed to feel something real under me. Dirt, stone, roots. The porch creaked beneath my weight as I stepped onto it. The same steps I once sat on as a boy, eating popsicles with sticky fingers. The same porch where Mom sat with her tea and warned me not to marry young. The same place where all of it began. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the old recorder. The cassette had been played so many times the tape hissed now, like it was breathing. I pressed play anyway. Her voice came through, soft and tired. If you're hearing this, then I suppose things didn't go the way I hoped. I'd listened to this part before. I knew it by heart. The warnings, the regrets, the sadness. But this time, I let it run until the end. And there, tucked behind static and the sound of her setting down the recorder, was something I hadn't caught the first time. A pause. Then, softly, "Tom, you are worthy of love. You don't have to carry pain just because someone hands it to you." I froze. The wind shifted. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime rattled like glass laughter. I closed my eyes. She'd left those words for me. Not to fight, not to punish, but to let go. I had built my revenge like a monument, stone by stone, precise, perfect, and when it finally stood tall, Linda smiled. Not because I failed, but because she wanted it more than I did. The truth was simple. I had burned down her life thinking I'd feel something. But now, in the smoke and silence, all I felt was tired. I clicked the recorder off, slipped it back into my pocket, and sat down on the edge of the porch. The sunset painted the sky in slow strokes of copper and blue, and the light fell across the broken garden like forgiveness. I ran my hand along the old railing, splintered but still standing. Some things don't need rebuilding. They just need to be left behind. I didn't forgive Linda. Not really. Not yet. But I didn't hate her anymore either. She was no longer the enemy in my head, no longer the shadow behind every thought. She was just a person, flawed, fragile, and gone. I breathed in deep, letting the scent of dry grass and dust settle in my chest. It didn't sting the way it used to. I wasn't whole. Not yet, but I was free. I stood, brushing dirt from my jeans, and took one last look at the porch. The past didn't live here anymore, and neither did I. As I turned back toward the road, the final thought came, clean and true. She was my sister. Now, she's just a woman I allowed to disappear from my life, and that was enough.